For many years, Baba Jimo lived a quiet life in the peaceful neighborhood of Aika. He was an elderly man, widowed and with children who had long grown up and moved far away. His home was a large one filled with empty rooms that he rented out to various tenants. Though he lived alone, Baba Jimo was never truly lonely. His tenants brought energy and warmth to the compound. There were daily conversations, shared meals, and the occasional argument that only added to the sense of life and community. Among all his tenants, his closest friend was Papa Adana, another elderly man who had also lost his wife. But unlike Baba Jimo, Papa Adana still had his two daughters living with him, Adana and Shay. These two girls were full of energy, caring, and well-mannered. They not only took care of their own father, but also looked out for Baba Jimo, often bringing him food or helping out with little chores. It was a peaceful, almost family-like environment. Over time, however, people began to pressure Baba Jimo to find a wife. His own children, whenever they called, would tell him he shouldn't grow old alone, that he needed someone to cook and care for him. Even the tenants made playful comments, teasing him about needing a woman in his life. Baba Jimo always brushed it off with a laugh and a shake of the head, insisting he was too old for marriage and content with the way things were. Content with the way things were. But one sunny afternoon, something changed. He called all his tenants to gather under the big mango tree in the yard. Whispers spread some thought he might be raising the rent, but when Baba Jimo appeared, he wasn't alone. A tall, dark-skinned woman stood beside him. "This is my new wife, Ayerti," he announced, "and she's now the landlady of this house." Everyone clapped politely, but the surprise in the air was heavy. The tenants had never expected him to actually remarry, especially not so suddenly. Ayerti smiled, but her eyes stayed sharp, scanning the faces before her. Something about her presence didn't feel entirely right. At first, Ari made an effort to blend in. She greeted the other women, spoke gently to the children, and acted as though she was eager to be part of the community. But it didn't take long before cracks began to show. Artie had no job and no children, so she spent most of her time doing housework, strangely, mostly laundry. No matter how many clothes she washed the day before, there would always be more the next morning. Soon, tenants started to notice that RT was monopolizing the shared spaces, especially the clothesline. When Kila, a young bachelor, politely asked her to make room for his clothes one morning, she snapped. "This is my husband's house," she said coldly. "I can do whatever I like. If you don't like it, move out." She slammed the door in his face. Whispers and frustration started to ripple through the compound. For the first time in years, tension began to replace the harmony. Adana and Shah, who had lived there far longer than Irti and always respected everyone, watched all of this unfold. And though they remained calm at first, they too were waiting for the moment Artai would cross the line with them. As the days passed, Irti's presence in the compound became increasingly hard to ignore. Her behavior grew more entitled and overbearing. She took over the communal washing line daily, leaving no space for others. She used the shared kitchen as if it belonged only to her, often moving people's things without asking or making snide remarks under her breath. When someone dared to speak up, she would remind them that she was the landlady now. Most of the tenants tried to keep the peace, choosing to avoid her rather than start trouble. But not everyone was willing to stay silent. Adana and Shah, Papa Adana's daughters, watched Irti closely. They saw the way she treated others and heard her dismissive tone when speaking to their father. It didn't sit right with them. They weren't the kind to back down when someone crossed the line, especially not in the home they had lived in peacefully for so long. One morning, the tension that had been simmering finally started to boil over. Shay had woken up early to wash clothes before the sun got too hot. She took her usual spot near the front of the compound and began scrubbing. Everything seemed normal until Ayerti walked out carrying a large bucket of wet laundry. Without saying a word, she went straight to the clothesline and began hanging her clothes, completely ignoring Shay's presence. Shay looked up, trying to stay calm. Excuse me, landlady, I'm still washing. I'll need space too," she said. Artie didn't respond. She kept hanging her clothes until the entire line was filled. Shay frowned and repeated herself, but Artie turned and walked away as if she hadn't heard a thing. Furious but composed, Shay continued washing. When she finished, she moved Irt's clothes to one side and spread her own. Later, when Irie saw her clothes had been touched, she screamed loud enough for the whole compound to hear her. She accused everyone, but when she turned to Adana, who had just stepped outside, Adana met her gaze calmly. "Do I look like I washed anything today?" she replied, standing tall. Irti's face turned red with rage. She stormed back into her home, muttering under her breath. From that moment on, she marked Adana and Shah as enemies. It didn't take long for the feud to become personal. Adana and Shay stopped acknowledging Irti entirely. If she walked by, they looked away. If she spoke, they said nothing. Worse yet, they made snide comments meant for her to hear. "Some women talk too much but can't even fight," Adana said loudly one day. "A woman without children should at least have good manners, but some people have nothing," Sho added, her voice sharp with meaning. Irti tried to pretend she didn't care, but it ate away at her. She wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by two young girls. They didn't fear her, didn't respect her, and didn't hide their feelings. And while the other tenants tiptoed around her, Adana and Shao stood their ground. Irti's anger grew into obsession. Every interaction, every glance, every comment from the girls felt like a knife. And deep inside, she started to crave more than just a reaction. She began to crave revenge. One evening, the opportunity Irti had been waiting for finally presented itself. The compound was quiet, the sun slowly sinking behind the trees. Adana and Papa Adana had gone to the nearby shop, leaving Shay alone to prepare dinner. She was in the communal kitchen, happily humming as she stirred a pot of vegetable soup, her father's favorite. The scent filled the air, and her stomach rumbled with hunger. When the soup was ready, she transferred it into a large bowl and left it on the table to cool. Moments later, her father and sister returned, drawn in by the delicious aroma. Something smells nice," Papa Adana said with a smile. Shay beamed and replied, "Yes, Papa, it's your favorite." The three of them washed their hands, sat down, and began to eat. It was a simple, comforting moment, just a family sharing dinner together, unaware that it would be their last. 10 minutes into the meal, everything changed. Papa Adana suddenly clutched his stomach and groaned in pain. My stomach, it's burning," he gasped. Shay looked up in alarm, but before she could even reach for him, she too felt a sharp twist in her gut. Her face contorted in pain as she dropped the cup she was holding. Adana, frozen with fear, asked Papa, "Cha? What's happening?" But neither of them could respond. They were coughing violently now. And then, to Adana's horror, blood began to drip from their mouths. "Somebody help, please, help," she screamed, rushing to their side. But as she held them, her own stomach suddenly clenched in unbearable pain. She fell to her knees, gasping, feeling something unnatural moving inside her. She tried to scream, but nothing came out. Everything went black. By the time neighbors rushed into the room after hearing her screams, the sight that met them was something out of a nightmare. Papa Adana and Shao were lifeless on the floor, their eyes wide open, blood pooling at their lips. Adana lay barely breathing, pale and trembling beside the bowl of soup. Moments later, Baba Jumo arrived and stood frozen at the doorway. No, he cried. Then, without warning, he turned and ran back to his house. When he returned, he was holding a small cloth bundle. Kneeling beside Adana, he unwrapped it to reveal a dark powder and, without hesitation, forced it into her mouth. The crowd watched in stunned silence. At first, nothing happened. Then Adana's body jerked violently. She opened her eyes wide and began to vomit. But what came out of her mouth wasn't food. It was nails, tiny iron nails, pieces of broken glass, and thick black liquid. The screams of horror from the neighbors echoed through the compound. "This is not ordinary," someone whispered. "This is witchcraft," but just as quickly as it had begun, it ended. Adana's body went still, her eyes rolled back, and with one final breath, she died. The room fell silent, 3 lives gone in a matter of minutes. No one said a word, but everyone was thinking the same thing. This wasn't a coincidence. Someone had done this. Someone had poisoned that soup. The next morning, police officers arrived at the compound. They moved quickly, taping off the scene, examining the food remains, and inspecting the lifeless bodies. A cloud of silence hung over the compound, broken only by whispers and the occasional sob, but despite the horror everyone had witnessed, no solid evidence could be found at first. The food was collected and sent to a lab for testing, but there were no clear signs of traditional poison. Just as the officers were about to leave in frustration, one of the women from the compound stepped forward. She hesitated, then cleared her throat. "I saw Ida yesterday evening," she said. "She was near the kitchen while Shell was cooking. She looked strange." I didn't think much of it at the time. Her voice shook, but her words sparked something. Another tenant quickly added, "Yes, I saw her too." And that same night, she packed a small bag and told someone she was traveling. No one's seen her since. All eyes turned toward Baba Jimo. The officers marched straight to his house. "Where is your wife?" one of them asked. Baba Jimo looked exhausted, his eyes bloodshot. "I don't know," he answered honestly. She left last night." "I haven't seen her since." The police weren't satisfied. "Your wife is now the prime suspect. If we can't find her, we'll have to take you in." Baba Jimo's face fell. "I had nothing to do with this," he insisted. "If you say it was poison, then find proof. But don't accuse me of witchcraft." He was taken to the station anyway, questioned for hours. They pressured him, tried to break him down, but he didn't budge. "Go find Artie," he kept saying. "She's the one you want, not me." But Artie had vanished. No one knew where she had gone. With no physical evidence from the food and no witness who had actually seen her poison it, the authorities had to release Baba Jimo. He walked out of the station with his shoulders heavy and his heart broken. When he returned to the compound, he gathered all the tenants. His voice was low and hoarse. "I'm sorry for what has happened," he said. "This is a terrible tragedy. We must come together to bury them properly." The compound fell into mourning. Everyone contributed what they could: money, food, time to arrange the funeral. The bodies of Papa, Adana, and Chow were transported to their village, where they were buried with love and pain. And yet, even in the middle of grief, one question remained: where was Airti? Some believed she had escaped to a far-off place, hiding to avoid justice. Others whispered darker theories that she had met her own end, or perhaps vanished into the world of spirits and darkness. Baba Jimo, once so proud of his independence and choices, now carried the weight of regret in his eyes. As he stood before the graves, he clenched his fists and whispered a promise into the wind. "Wherever you are, Irti, you will never escape what you've done. Not in this life, not in the next." Days passed, but Artie was never found. The police searched nearby towns, checked transport stations, even circulated her description in local markets, but there was no trace of her. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. Without any direct evidence, no poison detected in the soup, no eyewitness seeing her tamper with the food, the case quickly hit a dead end. The only thing the investigators had were suspicions and gut feelings, but the law needed proof. Babajima was questioned again, but his story never changed. He had no idea where she had gone. Despite public whispers and private doubts, the authorities had no choice but to close the investigation for lack of evidence. No one was charged, no one was arrested. The compound, once filled with life and laughter, now carried the weight of unresolved pain and unanswered questions. The tenants tried to move on, but the shadow of what happened lingered everywhere. People walked quieter now. Children didn't play as loudly in the yard. The communal kitchen felt haunted. No one wanted to cook where the soup had been poisoned. Even the once friendly chatter beneath the mango tree had gone silent. Worst of all, Babajima walked around like a man haunted by his own choices. He didn't speak much anymore, and when he did, it was only when necessary. The joy he used to show when his tenants brought him food or conversation had disappeared. Everyone could see the guilt in his face. Though no one blamed him directly, the unspoken truth hung in the air he had brought Ai into their lives. He had allowed her into their home, their space, their trust, and now 3 people were dead. People who had done nothing to deserve such an end. Rumors continued to swirl. Some tenants swore they had dreams about Ayurti, standing at the edge of their beds or staring from the trees at night. Others believed she had turned to dark magic long ago, and now the evil had finally consumed her. A few whispered that she might have taken her own life after realizing what she had done, hiding her shame from the world. But most agreed on one thing: whether she was alive or dead, she would never find peace. Babajimo, who once laughed off the idea of loneliness, now found himself in a house more silent than ever before. He no longer sat outside with the other elders. He no longer greeted anyone with warmth. His days were filled with long stares and quiet prayers. And every evening, as he stood at the edge of the compound watching the sunset, one could see the weight of his regret pressing into his shoulders. In his heart, he knew. Even if IT was never caught, her punishment had already begun. Because no one walks away from that kind of evil without leaving a trail of suffering behind. In the weeks that followed, the compound slowly tried to return to some sense of normalcy, but nothing felt the same. The mango tree that once shaded joyful gatherings now cast a cold shadow. The washing lines remained half empty, as if no one dared to occupy the space where conflicts had begun. Tenants whispered less, laughed less, and always kept an eye on one another, not out of suspicion, but out of fear. It wasn't just the horror of the deaths that haunted them, it was the silence that followed. No justice, no closure, just emptiness. And in the middle of that emptiness stood Babajimo, a man broken by regret. He aged more in those few weeks than in the last 10 years. He had once prided himself on his independence, on his ability to make decisions for himself. But one decision inviting a woman into his life without truly knowing her had cost 3 innocent people their lives. He knew he could never undo what had been done, and that knowledge hollowed him out from the inside. People began to avoid mentioning Ariti's name. Her presence had become like a curse, one that no one wanted to summon. But her story lingered in every corner, in every sideways glance, in every silence that followed a memory. What disturbed the tenants most wasn't just what she had done, but how convincingly she had blended in at first. Her smile, her calm voice, the way she greeted the children, it had all seemed so normal. And yet behind that smile was someone capable of something monstrous. It taught them something important. That evil doesn't always wear a scary face. Sometimes it comes dressed in politeness and small talk, hiding behind the rules society gives like wife, landlady, or woman in need of love. In the end, it wasn't just about a feud or a slap or some disrespectful words. It was about the darkness that grew inside someone who felt powerless and chose revenge over peace, hatred over healing. The story of Baba Jimbo's compound may sound like just another dramatic folktale, but for many who watched from the outside, it felt eerily close to real life. So often, we are quick to judge people based on surface impressions or pity. We open our doors, our hearts, and our lives to people simply because we think they deserve a second chance, or worse, because we feel pressured to fill a void. But caution is not cruelty. Discernment is not arrogance. There are people in this world who are dealing with inner battles we may never understand, some of whom are capable of causing harm just to feel powerful again. The tragedy that happened in that quiet compound was a warning disguised as a story. Not everyone who asks to enter your life comes with good intentions. And when you ignore your instincts or the red flags others can clearly see, the cost might be higher than you ever imagined. As the saying goes, when you see someone dancing naked in the marketplace, they're not alone. Someone, somewhere, is fueling that madness. So be careful who you trust. Be careful who you let into your circle. Because once the door is open, you might not be able to close it fast enough to stop what's coming through.